Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. If you haven't joined and been a part of their coffee club, make sure you get to blackriflecoffee.com, be able to check out their coffee club. If you're a coffee lover, I know Kyle is. I know so many people are. I haven't necessarily dabbled in the coffee, Kyle. I've been abstaining because I have an addictive personality. If I did it, I'd probably be spending a lot more money on coffee. But be a part of the coffee club, get the daily or the monthly updates, and then also get access and opportunities to coffee that you maybe isn't available to the public, kind of taste tester for Black Rifle Coffee Company. But Kyle, episode 147 of the podcast today, we are recapping Watts Bar a little bit and previewing Lake of the Ozarks because there's no rest for the weary. Back-to-back opens to almost wrap up the season. Stop 7 and stop 8 back-to-back. Got like 2 weeks off before the final open happens in mid-October. So welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. And Kyle, Watts Bar's in the books, and we're looking towards Eufaula already. I mean, not Eufaula, Lake of the Ozarks.
Yeah, no, it's starting to get there. Obviously, once you saw the schedule in the middle of the summer, kind of where we had the lull, it looked like, well, there's 3 tournaments all in September and October, but basically being back to back here with Watts Bar and Lake of the Ozarks, we're gonna get some things figured out pretty quickly as far as the points are concerned, and things are going to change, and we've obviously seen them change already as it is with Watts Bar. So a lot to fish for, a lot going on, and if you're trying to make a run, if you're one of those guys that's outside of the top 10 and by a decent margin, this is where you got to make that run.
Yeah, and I think when we talked about the opens and going to fishing all 9 of them, I think the big talk that we had was replicating and creating a top level professional. This is setting them up for a gauntlet. You got to fish 9 events just like you would for the Elite Series. It's a long season. You can have good spurts, but you can have downturns. You better catch them all year and prepare the way that these elite guys do for their schedule. Well, this is a perfect test of that. Normally, we have never in the history had back-to-back opens unless it was like 2 separate divisions. It was the Southern event, and then we had a Central event. Normally, you didn't have crossover back in the day. Well, with everyone fishing all of them, this is the first back-to-back that we've had. This is a great test, Kyle. We go from East Tennessee over to Missouri. You got to go and switch up tackle at times. You got to reprogram yourself. Also, if you made the final day, you're going to be fishing 5 days of practice, 3 days of the tournament, travel over to Missouri, fish 4 days of practice probably because you're going to miss one of them, and then maybe 3 more days of tournament. So you're going to be fishing for over 2 weeks in a row like the elite guys do. I think this is a great test of that. And East Tennessee in the fall and the Ozarks in Missouri, they're not drastically different, but with the grass potential that they had at Watts Bar, there will be some tackle adjustments. And so, it's good to see the brain shift real quick. You can't hang on what you just did at Watts Bar and maybe use that the following week. You got to kind of reprogram for Ozarks coming up this week.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's certainly differences, like you said. I mean, when you factor in boat traffic will be a far bigger issue, of course, with Lake of the Ozarks. It's a really big party lake as far as pontoons and party barges and wakeboard boats and jet skis and things of that nature. Obviously a ton of docks. It's going to be docks just about everywhere. Steeper, clear water. Not that Watts Bar doesn't have some of that, but I mean, it's definitely a different ball game. And like you said, there will certainly have to be a little bit of an adjustment as far as tackle's concerned. Not a complete from like fishing in Florida to like smallmouth fishing or anything crazy like that, but it's still going to be a little different and definitely a change of scenery. That's for sure.
And one thing that I'll say that remains somewhat the same was our top 10 in points. When we look at how Watts Bar went, also, why don't we just go ahead? Congratulations to Tyler Williams winning the Watts Bar Open and going now to the Bassmaster Classic because he's solidified it. That was the last one of the Northern, the Division 3, the Northern Division somewhat. That was the last one there. So he is in the Classic already. And now going to the Ozarks and then Harris Chain. Congrats to Tyler Williams. We had such a star-studded top 10. I'm going to try to remember we're shooting this podcast, obviously, after the event, but I don't have the standings right in front of me. You had 4 former top-level pros in Bobby Lane, Ish Monroe, Greg Bohannon, and Jason Lambert. Absolute like studs across the board, have all had really high success, whether it was at the FLW Tour or the Elite Series in past years. Then you had the top 3 in our EQ, St. Croix Rods Opens point standings with JT Tompkins, John Garrett, and Trey McKinney. So that's 7 of your 10 were either have been pros or they are the top 3 positions on becoming pros in the points race this coming season. Then of the other 3 anglers that we had Wesley Gore, fished, was a great high school angler, competed at Montevallo, which is now becoming a powerhouse in college fishing. And then you had Tyler Williams, who won it, a 21-year-old from Maine. And then the last one was Chase Henley, the only like exclusive local in the field, it seemed, and he made the top 10 even with boat trouble and issues throughout day 1 of the event. He was in the contention going the final day, and David Gaston was the one guy in the Elite Series hoping Chase Henley got it done, because Chase Henley would have been his best friend. If Chase won that event, David gets in the Classic because Chase wasn't eligible. You have to fish at least all 3 in a division to make the Classic. So we had some points guys. We had some former pros trying to re-become pros at the elite level. And then you had some of the biggest names in the Opens point standings. And so you weren't covering the event specifically. You were doing the high school combine down at Wheeler Lake. But did you keep an eye on the Watts Bar event? And what did you kind of notice before we get into what I saw on Bass Live throughout the event?
Well, I was gonna say, if we're recapping this event, I'm not gonna be a whole lot of help, because I certainly had my hands full with the high school combine. Of course, like you said, it went from, I was there from Thursday to Sunday, so I didn't get a chance to watch live, which was a real bummer. Obviously, I saw some of the highlights on social media and on the website, of course, but seemed as if it was a good tournament. It seemed like guys were mostly fishing shallow, which is something with all the things that have been going on in the fishing industry, was reaffirming to see, I guess, in a way.
It was like 50-50.
Say,
I would say 50-50. 50% were using forward-facing sonar and 50% were fishing the bank. And the ones who were using forward-facing sonar weren't necessarily Damiki rig fishing. They were looking at brush piles with big jigs, just trying to pinpoint where they would do it, just like we would if there was a waypoint, in 2D and down, or 360 just a few years ago. So it was a different kind of forward-facing for sure.
That's the one thing I noticed from and you can attest to this or not, seemed like from watching some of the highlights was, at least for me, when I think of fall time fishing, and I say fall, I mean it's late summer, early fall, it's kind of that transition time. I think of like flat banks, wood, things like that. It seemed like there's a lot of guys fishing undercut type banks. I don't know, like maybe you could explain that better, because I like I said, I wasn't able to really watch and keep up with it, but it seemed like that seemed to be a reoccurring theme, which for this time of the year seemed a little bizarre, but maybe you have some more insight on that.
Well, I one big thing about Watts Bar, I fished a college regional there, I think in 2014. Yeah, it was 2014. I fished the college regional there, and I did so fishing solo. And it's totally different. We launched at the bottom end of the lake where half the competitors ended up fishing on the final day. But in Kingston, Tennessee, up there, it's a lot more river. This is obviously towards the headwaters of the Tennessee River, Fort Loudon and Tellico just above it. But otherwise, it's pretty river-like. And then all of a sudden it gets down to the bottom of the lake where other things, where it's kind of built up a little bit more, where things change. But it didn't seem, from my recollection and from what Mark Menendez also said, it doesn't have really many flats like other places on the Tennessee River do. It kind of is more like a highland type body of water for the most part on some of these banks, kind of like when you take a left out of Chickamauga and you start to head up there where Mike Huff is fishing a jig on bluff banks with laydowns off of them, things like that. Some of the guys who are fishing, off the bank but near the bank, were fishing, brush piles where the channel swung up against those deeper banks, and boom, there's a brush pile in, 8 to 14 feet of water. Some guys, I mean, when I'd ask them what their depth, their consistent depth, they said, yeah, I'm fishing 8 to 15 and sometimes in 20 and as far out as 35. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, thanks for clearing that up for me. You're kind of fishing late summer, and then you're fishing some areas where they may are transitioning to. Obviously the hydrilla and milfoil, it's coming into the lake decent in places. And so there were some different stretches and pockets that really were dependent on that. That's what Bobby Lane, excelled on in the first 2 days when he was the leader after day one and then made the top 10, obviously. Then you had guys like Ish who went up the river more so and was fishing just top water along anything that looked good on the banks. Seawalls were big as well. So I wouldn't say it was a ton of flat banks offerings other than the backs of pockets. I think Jason Lambert, where he was fishing in the back of a pocket, a bay type deal. There was flats with grass on it. And then Greg Bohannon was more on the main river around some islands, but it was kind of flat in there. But for the most part, you didn't really have many flat options. So, but I was happy to see 50% went south of takeoff. And even though we were at the top end of the lake, 50% went north of takeoff. So, and we got to kind of see a diversity of it. But yeah, Tyler Williams winning that event. Congratulations to him. 21 years old from Belgrade, Maine. I believe he said on the phone he'll be the second person from the state of Maine to fish the Bassmaster Classic, which is pretty neat. Also, Kyle, we know this. Me and you know this very well. How about the top three? 21, 21, and 18 years old. I mean, and then if you go to fourth, I think it was Lambert. Fifth was John Garrett in his 20s. So 4 of the top 5 were in their mid-20s or younger. Absolutely incredible. Just the way the sport, we asked about it. Let's grow the sport. Now the old regime's kind of like, holy crap, these young guys are like really good. And they're like, they want it just as bad as we used to.
For sure. Yeah. No, I hadn't even really thought about that as far as the age of the top 3, but I will say this too, with Tyler Williams, I told you, I guess it would have been 2 years ago. I covered him in a nation at Pennsylvania and at Lake Erie, and it was a slugfest, and he was beating a ton of guys, local guys there in that tournament. And I remember telling you, this guy's like good. This kid's like really, really good. I didn't know he was this good. I didn't know he was going to like jump into the opens and have some success like pretty much right away. But he has really shined. And then obviously the guys below him, not to take anything away from them, it's just the points leader, and then guy that's been in the top 5 all year long. So yeah, the youth invasion continues on the Bassmaster Tournament Series for sure.
Yeah, and Tyler, we were talking about it on live. He is like a young John Cox. He was so giggly and laughing, like every catch. Like I would have assumed if you take Bass Track and the leaderboard away, and I'm just tuned in to watch live, and we didn't have the little slider at the bottom, he was probably in 8th or 9th, maybe 10th place, probably about 12, 14 pounds behind, just happy to be in the top 10. That's what I would have taken away from it. But he was the freaking leader, and he was fishing about as free and relaxed as you can get. So absolutely crazy. But congratulations to him. Now we transition quickly. Like no rest for the weary, like I was saying. You got to run over and fish Lake of the Ozarks for the 8th stop of the season. Another fall transition-based event, still late summer for the most part in this region of the country, but the mornings have been cooler. I walked out in shorts and a sun shirt this morning to go to Bible study, and literally at 6 a.m. it's staying cold outside compared to what I was expecting. So it is the deal with that is now the more colder evenings we have in this part of the country, the quicker some of these things can change. And our guest today, Casey Scanlon, we recorded that last week before we started practice at Watts Bar and then obviously Ozarks. So he gave us a preview of that to the best of his ability. But before we jump into the Ozarks exclusively, there have been some changes in the top 10 in points. So we refer to the top 10 because Kenta Kimura is in the top 10. He's already elite qualified. So if you're wondering who qualifies from the Opens, it's the first 9 anglers that are not already on the elites and are trying to qualify there. If you have Kenta in there, just look at the top 10. Those guys will be on the elites next year. When we came into the event, I'll say 7 of our top 10 have stayed the same. There were 3 guys who fell out, 3 guys who rose in. Those 3 guys would be Jamie Bruce, Joey Nania, and Matt Henry all fell out of the top 10. A little bit surprising for me that Henry and Nania, obviously Jamie Bruce is from 900 hours away up in Western Canada, but Nania and Henry, I thought they'd do a little better than they did. They dropped out a little bit. Some different issues for them. They're still in the race. They still have a shot at if they have a good Ozarks and then obviously don't bomb in Florida. But Wesley Gore, Jacob Bigelow, and Kyle Austin all replaced them. We all know those names, Kyle. Wesley Gore, He is like I mentioned, Montevallo high school college fishing product. Kyle Austin, we saw him at the Chesapeake Bay Open live last year. He is a part of that Trey Swindle, Sam George traveling group, a bunch of young hammers from Alabama and South Carolina, Georgia region. And he is a guide on Santee Cooper for catfish and for bass. So that's Kyle Austin. And then Jacob Bigelow. If you don't know about Jacob Bigelow, I know you may, but our fans, a Sturgeon Bay kid. I mean, 5 years ago in my DMs, y'all need to come back to Sturgeon Bay because we had an event in 2015. Y'all need to come back to Sturgeon Bay. Who is this kid talking about Sturgeon Bay all the time, or the weights? And this is a Sturgeon Bay is just as good as a smallmouth place as some of these other ones y'all go to. Y'all need to come back to Sturgeon Bay. Now, Jacob Bigelow's in the top 10 in our EQ points race. Maybe he'll have some more pull, Kyle, if he makes the elites of like, hey, I got the Chamber of Commerce on the phone. Let's make this happen. But there's your 3 movers and shakers. Otherwise, the top 10 pretty much stayed the same. We have JT Tompkins, John Garrett. It's about a 20-point gap or so, 23. Another 30 points to Trey McKinney, and that remains unchanged because they all finished second, third, and fifth in the Open. So very little points to be shared there. Kenta Kamira in fourth, trying to fight for that $10,000 AOY race. Not in it to qualify. He's already done that. Robert G. from the University of Tennessee, now fishing the Opens. He's fifth. Brett Cannon, sixth. He moved up from lower in the top 10. I think he was like 10th. He moved into sixth. Keith Tuma, who was sixth, is now seventh. And then those 3 that we just mentioned. So a little bit of turnover, a little bit of change. But for the most part, what a stud top 10 still. If you don't know them, you better get to know them because they're right on the doorstep of qualifying.
Yeah, and like you said, if you pay attention, and you really have I guess been covering some of these guys since college, high school, like we have, it's not a huge surprise that that the guys that are up there. But certainly, I guess the more surprising part is, like you mentioned last time we were on the podcast, is the amount of guys outside of the top 10 that you just basically can't believe aren't inside the top 10. You're like, they're getting left out right now. Like, obviously there's some, there's plenty of time here with 2 events left to make a change. A lot of things can happen. Guys that are inside the top 10 can have a bad event and fall way out. And then, of course, we've seen the types of jumps you can make. But yeah, when you look at the groups below, the top 9, top 10, it is utterly shocking to see some of those names. You're like, man, I cannot believe. And then you just keep going. You're like, well, I can't believe they're not in it. And I can't believe they're not in it. And it just goes down and on and on and on, which is really just a testament to the competition in the Opens, which obviously is something that we've been hearing about for years now. And I think it's gotten, exponentially stronger in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, if you're looking at guys who have won this year, Adam Rasmussen, he won at Wheeler. Then you look at Ben Milliken, Toledo Bend, Joey Nania, Eufaula, Oklahoma, Tyler Williams, Watts Bar last week. All those guys are 17th, 18th, 19th, and 24th. So winning doesn't just guarantee you to be
For sure.
a part of anything. And I'll say this, coming into the event, I think Bobby Lane was 21st in points, about 60, 65 points behind. He is now 34 points behind. He has closed the gap, cut it in half after a top 10 performance, which you would think, I made a top 10 out of 200 boats, I'm going to cut it more than just 30 points. But that's all he gained on it. It's still about 60 points. It's 67 from 10th to 20th. And the big gap there is, even though Logan Parks is the first man out right now, like he was last year in the EQ race for the overall, it's not just I need to gain 1 spot. I need to gain a certain amount of points. He is 21 points behind the next spot. So he could beat, Kyle Austin by 10 points each of the next 2 events and still fall short. So the point gaps are interesting. 21 points from Kyle Austin and Logan Parks, 13 more points to Kyle Patrick and Bobby Lane. And then it's kind of like 5 or 6. And then all of a sudden, from Sam George to Andrew Upshaw, 15th to 16th, there's another 16-point gap. So 16 to 20-point gap between a spot isn't a ton, but it actually is getting more and more. It's becoming, if you have a 16-point lead after 3 events, that's slim to none. If you have a 16-point event lead out of 2 events left, it's becoming a bigger task, but that's still just one day of competition. That's a guy finishing 35th after day 1 and getting into the top 20. That's a guy being in 10th after day one and dropping to 20th. There's 20 something points of change for both of them. So now let's get into Lake of the Ozarks. This is our neck of the woods now, Kyle. I really love when we fish in the fall. It's not easy. It's tough at times, but I really love the Ozarks because there's so many things you can do. You can go fish structure like brush piles. You can go fish deep points. You can fish over suspended fish, probably Damiki style if you really wanted to. But at Lake of the Ozarks, we predominantly know when you get to October, maybe November, maybe late September, you could lock a topwater in your hand all day long. And obviously my favorite thing to fish, you can fish docks all day long to Kingdom Come as well. You can go as far away from takeoff as you want and get away from people, or you can stay as close as you want and have plenty of stuff to fish. It's a very big body of water with a lot of boat traffic, like you said. And with our tournament being one day later and being Friday full field, Saturday full field, and top 10 Sunday, we're going to have 200 boats on a Saturday when, Missouri football's not playing and they're going to be out on the water. Because, I mean, even if they were playing, they're not even caring. They're going to just look for they're going to look for the 61-yard field goal on Sports Center later or something. But yeah, so Ozarks should be a good one. This lake has been fishing phenomenally for the lakes in our region, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas. Ozarks has got to be one of the top 2 places. I mean, you did a video last fall with Bob Downey where he classified as one of his 5 favorite Midwestern lakes. If you could consider Missouri Midwestern, he said it's in his top 5.
Yeah, it's got big fish. I think, the tournaments you see here in the springtime, like March, pre-spawn, late pre-spawn, you see the big fish. I mean, there are giants that live in there, and there's a good population of fish, just like you see with all the White River lakes. Not that it's a White River lake, but obviously has a lot of comparisons, a lot of similarities. So I'm like you. I really hope that by the time we get to Bassmaster Live on the final day, it's just a topwater fest and everybody's just catching them blowing up, and you're just looking at a 4-box or whatever it may be of just topwater, just walking the dog just left and right. And then, that would be my ideal scenario. But like you said, the reality of it is probably not going to happen because there's so many things you can do. I think you can certainly go find, dirtier water. I wouldn't say it's necessarily you're going to find like muddy water by any means, but like you can get in the backs of creeks and do things like that. I mean, you look at it on a map and it's very similar to a lot of the Ozark lakes that, have super long creeks that go on forever and ever and ever. And, it's not unlikely that some guys would be able to find some stuff in the backs of those, given the time of the year. And then obviously, like you said, if you find a dock pattern, you'll be able to run it because there's plenty of docks in the lake. And, especially if you can dial in something specific, that could certainly be a big player. But yeah, I think everything's going to be a play. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be like easy or good. Like you said, it's not necessarily a time of the year where you're like, this is the time of year you want to be fishing for, Lake of the Ozarks. But like, it is a time of the year where it's going to offer a lot. There's going to be a lot of things going on, and guys will kind of have their choice of which direction they go. So I'm super looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to this one. Honestly, I said back in last October, I guess it was, before the schedule came out, I was asked on a video what my favorite, which open I was looking forward to. And it was this one, just because, like you said, closer to our general neck of the woods. They're in Arkansas and South Missouri, but I am looking forward to it. And I hope that there's some topwater action to be seen on Bassmaster Live.
Yeah, I could see just based on how Watts Bar fished and how these temperatures in Arkansas are, I'd expect some of the same for Missouri. Some hoodie weather in the mornings. Topwater jig fishing. I could see a chatterbait and a spinnerbait playing in the backs of the pockets for sure. I think it's going to be key to catch some early, especially before boat traffic gets out there. I could see when I covered the guys in March, there was a schooling fish deal in March. It was very cold, hail, rain came in, but a lot of bait fish pushed into pockets. And there was fish, literally, they were throwing a fluke and catch them in the middle of the pockets. And so I could see something like that also popping up. And then once that boat traffic gets out there and you start bobbing around, you're going to have to make an adjustment maybe, and you may go to your dock fish or something like that. If that's going to be the best, most efficient way to fish. So We could go, through all of it ourselves, but why don't we just have a former Elite Series pro, one of our Opens guys, Casey Scanlon, coming into the week. He was in the 30s in AOI. He is now 26th after updating this. Obviously, our conversation was before Watts Bar, just with the back-to-back. He has now moved up to 26th. And Kyle, he's at 1017. 1017. We said the projection was like 1,400 and change for maybe the 10th place position. That means he's going to need two, top 10s. But he still has a shot to do so. If he really has a good showing, he can make the Classic as well. He did that through the Opens in past years. Casey Scanlon, if he can get a top 10 this week, chaos could happen at the Harris Chain, and he could slide his way in. But he is our guest today, lives on the lake, works on the lake, and has had to not fish the lake for a month with the off limits. So got to talk to Casey Scanlon, and he got to preview Lake of the Ozarks with us. Kyle, we talked about it. Our guest today, Casey Scanlon. It's hard to put a thumb on certain anglers when they come to the Ozarks. Obviously when you think about the local potential here, the guys who may jump in and try to jackpot or cherry pick an event, there are some guys that could show up and do well in this event. But the guys who have competed in all the Opens this year, there's a short list of good Ozark hammers, and Casey Scanlon, you're one of them. Appreciate you joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ronnie.
Casey, Lake of the Ozarks, it's a place that I don't necessarily want to be in a boat in late April through July or August, just based on how many party boats there are on the lake. But when you get to September time period and you think about how tough fall fishing can be, there's no better place probably than the Ozarks in terms of locking a topwater or locking your favorite fall fishing bait in your hand and going for a couple days and covering water. The Ozarks is a great place to kind of end the open season almost.
Yeah, it's an awesome lake. We haven't been here for a major tournament in a while, so I'm really excited about it. The lake is very big. It fishes pretty good in September. Usually, a lot of these big events are following, some major tournaments. We're going to have a lot of tournaments on the lake throughout the fall, so there'll be some pressure out there, but I think the bite's going to be good. You can do whatever you want here, shallow to deep, and I think it's all going to be in play in September. And the big boats are still going to be out. So we got the tournament going Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and if there's any sunshine at all, it's going to be bumpy.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to be at the event shooting photos on the water, so I'm looking forward to that already. Breaking my back out there, hopefully. Casey, I was gonna ask about this. So, once we get to the fall, I know September, conditions wise in that part of the country can be still really warm, or you can start to get those cold nights and start to feel a little bit like fall. As far as the conditions are concerned, like what are you looking for the most, I guess? Like if you could pick your ideal conditions, and then also like, do you think it'd be better if the conditions just stayed more stable towards like the summer type weather?
I'm all for the changing conditions. Honestly, I'd love it if some things kind of changed. Maybe even tournament day. This lake is a lake that, unlike a lot of the Ozark lakes, it can fluctuate a lot. It stays relatively stable throughout the year. We've had some water drop in here just in the last few days. So they're drawing it down a little bit. That could change things a little bit. But for a lake that's as stable as it is, the fish tend to do a lot of different things, and they tend to change day to day. So it's it's a lake where you got to stay on your toes and kind of fish the conditions. But September should be a really good time. I mean, right now we've got, pretty warm nights, or pretty warm nights still, very warm during the day, but temperature's been fluctuating. It's starting to feel like fall a little bit. So I think there's going to be a lot of things going on here in a couple weeks, and fishing should be really good.
I've covered a college event there, and I think it was the week after a Bassmaster Classic. If I remember correctly, it was the week after the Conroe Classic in 2017. So it was mid to late March. I mean, it was storming. I'm pretty sure a giant hailstorm came through. Like you said, those changes that happen on the Ozark fishery, it can throw people for a loop, but it often seems like, and I also remember covering a team championship event at Norfolk, right there on northern Arkansas, right below Missouri. And I remember in both of these events that the local Arkansas, Missouri teams, whether it was the team championship or college, when those conditions changed, people rolled into town and it was frigid cold temperatures for that team deal. And for the college deal, obviously hail and a lot of rain influx. It seems like that is the most comfortable time for the locals because they know those slight adjustments. What are the a little adjustments? Not, you don't have to give away all your goods, but like if it did have an influx of rain, or we did have 4 nights of cold weather or 2 nights of cold weather right before the tournament, we think it shocks the fish, but what does it open up more things, or does it narrow it into this is the one thing I need to be doing now?
Yeah, definitely narrows it down for sure. The patterns change daily here. This is a huge lake, so when things do change, being a local definitely has its benefits. The fish here like to bite, so typically it's not about the fish shutting down. It's about adjusting and figuring out what they're doing. And go ahead.
I was just going to ask, just as a general, obviously, Ronnie has mentioned this will be on Bassmaster Live on the last day. For the viewer, what would you expect to be some of the deals? Maybe not necessarily what you're going to be doing, but some of the things that'll be in play. Ronnie obviously mentioned a top water. I think that's something people are looking forward to. What would you expect in preview for this tournament?
Yeah, a lot of dock fishing. This lake, you're hard pressed to find open bank besides a few areas on the lake. So you're going to see a lot of docks. From shallow to deep. You're going to see there's a variety of cover in the lake. So when I say a guy can do anything, he can literally do anything. And the lake's over 100 miles long. So if a guy wants to catch them in September, the playbook is really big. You can do a lot of different things. So I expect to see the top 10, maybe doing 5, 6, 7 different things. You're going to have guys run way up the river, fish shallow. You're going to have guys, fishing extremely deep, whether it's structure, brush piles, deeper boat docks. Definitely the top water could be in play. It's a little early for that, but definitely going to be some fish weight on that. The docks, of course, there's going to be a variety of patterns happening there. So you could, and with the live scope and, new guys coming to town, it could be, a whole different thing than some of us locals are used to seeing. So I expect it to be a fun tournament. I think, I think docks are going to be the main deal come September. But, depending on the conditions, if the lake comes up again, that could open up some things as well. So
one big thing that we changed for the Bassmaster Open season this year that helps, for the most part, guys that are out of towners or guys that have other, their hands in other projects like you may, the 30-day or the 28-day off limits period where you can't necessarily fish the lake. That also kind of hurts the local jackpotters or the single division guys that would normally fish. Me and Kyle were talking about this, the last 3 events: East Tennessee, the Ozarks, and Central Florida. That is the hotbed, the 3 most hotbed places for local anglers that are going to jump in and win something. But with that month off limits for them and not being out there every single day or having the accessibility to go hop out there in an evening after work, does that kind of tilt it back into a little bit of it's wide open on who could factor? Or obviously those locals or anglers like yourself who have knowledge of here, not being on the lake for a month doesn't hurt you because you know how to practice differently during the official practice time. So what's your thought been on navigating a month off limits? You're well accustomed to that as a professional angler for your whole career, but yeah, it is a little different for the opens now.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me being off the lake for a month or whatever. I mean, in my head right now, I feel like, I could go out there and fish the Derby. I've already kind of lined up what I'd like to do. You always know that usually doesn't work, but it doesn't bother me in the aspect of being off the water. I do guide here at Lake of the Ozarks, so I've had to, turn down some guided trips and things like that, which has allowed me to, get out there and, work on my house and do some other stuff some chores that I should have probably been doing all summer. But, that's the big thing. We live here on the lake. We go out on the water and eat dinner and swim and do all that stuff. So that's the big part about being off the water for 30 days is just being able to look at the water and not touch it.
Well, Kyle, at least we know his back's going to be well intact for the last 3 events of the season since he's been off the water during the heat of the summer. You're good then. You're well rested.
That's right.
Let's talk about weights for a minute. Let's, obviously this time of year on Lake of the Ozarks, haven't had any tournaments here recently, so it's kind of hard to gauge. What would be your weight prediction as far as, what you think it'll take to win and then what you think it'll take to make the final day?
Okay. I think you're going to have to have probably 33 pounds to make the final day. And I think you're going to have anywhere from 54 to 60 pounds to win the tournament. I mean, if you're going to go out there and fish, in the evening or fish, a team tournament on the weekends, you better have 20 pounds or more at least a 4-pound average if you're even going to think about winning. But I fish some of these multi-day tournaments down here in the fall, and they're usually after we have a big bass tournament down here that gets 5, 6, 7,000 entries. And usually these tournaments are like the week following that. So there'll be a little bit less pressure on the water. So you may see the weights bigger, but usually like in those 3-day events in the fall, it takes, in the mid 50s, but you'll see a lot of big fish caught, and the potential is there for more, of course.
Well, that's phenomenal. We know when we go to the fall, like I just keep referring back to Sam Rayburn last year to end the open season. Logan Latuso got second place. He had 5 pounds on day 1, 31 pounds on day 2, and 7 pounds on day 3. That's a 15-pound per day average. And you're talking about you're going to need 16.5 just to make the final day, obviously closer to that 18 to 20 range to maybe win the event. That's fantastic weights. Do you feel that Lake of the Ozarks is underrated for, we want to pigeonhole some of these lakes. Like we want to be in Florida for the spawn because that's when 10-pounders show up. We want to be in the Ozarks pre-spawn for cranking and jerking because that's where it happens, or when the topwater bites crazy in the fall. But what is the Lake of the Ozarks fish like in the summer? I mean, is it a pretty solid, we see Table Rock go up and down weights wise. Is Ozarks, with it being predominantly largemouth and stuff, is that one of the most underrated lakes in this region?
I would say in the region, definitely. I mean, it's, I would say hands down the best lake in Missouri. As far as, weights go, Table Rock's fun. A lot of fish in there. Probably your potential at catching a 10-pounder at Table Rock is greater than here, but this lake is loaded with 3 to 6 pound fish, and we catch them every day, and they like to bite. We've got a lot of boat traffic, a ton of boat docks, which makes it hard to get to a lot of them. I mean, there's more boat docks here than I would say anywhere in the country. So it helps these fish spawn, it helps protect them, and we've got a good population of fish. And the water level, it fluctuates 3 feet a year, maybe 4 or 5 foot at the most, and it's pretty predictable on when it kind of goes up and down. So these fish get good spawns for the most part, and the lake stays consistent.
Casey, I feel like I gotta ask this. 10 years ago, you fished the Bassmaster Classic at Grand Lake. What would it mean to you 10 years later to win on your home lake and go back to Grand Lake for the Classic next year?
it'd feel pretty awesome. I think I won an Open to get in that tournament there. So it'd kind of be like deja vu. I love Grand Lake. It fishes a little bit like this one. And as far as, having the boat docks and whatnot. And, that tournament, I was young, and I wish I could do it over again. I put a lot of work into that derby, and didn't do as good as I should have. And going into that, I thought I was had the potential to win for sure. So I'd love another chance at the Classic, and of course to be on Grand Lake would be awesome.
This time of the year, it's a high stress time for bass fishermen in general. There's anglers on the Elite Series worried about staying requalified for the next season. We've had all kinds of like up and down. Nobody's getting cut because of COVID. And then now we're having to implement cuts. So people are kind of blindsided by, oh no, my average isn't as good as I thought it was. Now I'm on the outside looking in. You have been an angler that was on the Elite Series, had to deal with that, that strife, but now you're in the Opens. After, we see the big checks behind you. You've won professional events. Like you said, you win Opens, you've won FLW events. Now you're on the Opens 10 years later, like from when we just mentioned, you're more mature, much wiser of an angler, but yet there's still a bunch of pressure going into the last like 2 months of the season, because going into Watts Bar for the last third of the year, you're only about 120 points out of the qualification, which in a 200 boat field for 3 straight events, that's doable. 120 points is a lot in the elites. 200 plus boats, you can make up 120 points. So where is Casey Scanlon's mindset, knowing that this is a time of the year where a lot of people can choke, a lot of people can fall short, and you're much wiser and much more veteran than a lot of the guys maybe ahead of you in the points?
Sure. And my finishes this year, I don't know if they've shown that or not. I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to the points lately. Early on, I was kind of looking at them, but 120 points sounds pretty doable. I feel really good about this tournament here at the house. And Watts Bar, never been there. Been looking at it on Google Earth and stuff, and I love going to lakes that I've never been to. So excited about that one. Love the Harris Chain. Had fantastic events there, and had not so fantastic events there as well. So, but love the fishery, and the pressure's not really getting to me. I've been swinging for it all year. My finishes, you can probably see that in. I've had a couple not so good ones, and a couple top 10s mixed in there. So I've been trying to go out there, fish kind of by myself if possible with that huge field, and kind of do my own thing and swing for it. But I've got a game plan here on these last couple, and that's to go out and have really high finishes, because that's what I'm going to need. So I'm going to go out there and continue to swing for the fences, and try to post a couple top 10s for sure.
Casey, I wanted to jump in, Kyle. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I wanted to follow up on that. Kyle and I were previewing Watts Bar with John Garrett, who has led the points for most of the year. Now he's, right behind JT Tompkins for qualification line. I told Kyle I would be okay if our rookie class, obviously people joining might not be necessarily rookies. Like if you qualify, you're not going to be a rookie, but I'll take the 9 anglers from 1 to 10 that would qualify. I would take 11 to 20. I would take 20 to 30. And where you're at, going into the last 3 events, 32nd, if you took 31 to 40 out of the standings, that is a fantastic rookie class coming in. Can you speak to the level of competition where you look down the list and you may not know them because they're not former pros or not from another tour or anything like that, but they might be college studs. They may be guys who are veterans of the Opens trying there. You can't skip a name without it being stud. And so 32nd might not be where you want to be at this point in the year, but man, you are right in the thick of a lot of really good anglers fighting for those 9 spots.
Yeah. I've had some not so good finishes on paper, but if you look back at some of them, maybe like Wheeler, and what I'm saying is I think I've posted a limit of every single day of competition, and averaged, pretty good weight, at least through those first several events there. And the guys just don't let up. So I don't know a lot of them, but there's been a lot of fish caught this year. That's impressed me. And you haven't seen a lot of guys falter. Some of these names that have been at the top have stayed up there. So we've had huge fields. We've had a lot of diverse fisheries. So it's been impressive for sure.
Ronnie, I was just going to ask one more general question.
Yeah.
Not so much about the points, just obviously talked about the lake itself. As a guy that's spent a lot of time on the White River, it's unique because I've got to travel around and just like you, haven't seen a ton of new bodies of water, different stuff. And it's very, very interesting to me that the White River lakes and Lake of the Ozarks, some of the lakes in that general area are so different than the rest of the lakes in the United States. Like I'm just curious, like what your perspective is on that, because you got guys that are obviously incredibly good, like in Florida, maybe like fishing grass. And then you have guys that are incredibly good fishing like Ozark style type lakes. Like explain like the differences, like for somebody that's maybe never been to a Ozark style lake, like how it's basically like being on another world in a sense.
Yeah, they're all kind of unique. We usually have multi-species. We've got all three of them in here. Even smallmouth definitely will not play in this tournament, but we've got them in here. So usually multi-species lakes. Usually you get some clear water, but you can find some dingy water as well. We've got standing timber in a lot of them, brush piles, but usually a lot of rock transitions are some of the main features. So it's just like an angler in Florida being able to read a lot of the different types of vegetation. Down here, you get to be able to read the different types of rock, and how that relates to, time of year. And then, but you learn to love hard cover. Wherever I go, I'm looking for boat docks, I'm looking for brush piles, things that kind of remind me of home. So, but definitely unique fisheries. We don't have hardly any grass in most of them. So, when I first started fishing on tour, that was a learning experience for sure. Just knowing what it was. And since then I've really learned to love fishing grass. But we definitely don't have much of it here to learn on in the Ozarks.
I remember in 2008 for the Bassmaster Classic when I was just entering high school, really gaining interest in fishing to a level of trying to learn and understand. And I saw the lake at Hartwell pulled so low, and I actually got that, hey, this is some rock to clay or clay to pea gravel transitions, and you could see the visual there in Alton Jones's camera view. And that totally opened my eyes. I never even considered. I only look at the bank when I was that age and didn't consider the differences under the water. So the Ozarks, living in Arkansas now in Little Rock, that's taught that I've learned a lot and been able to even pick up on those subtleties. So that's super cool, Casey. Well, Kyle, if you're out, I'm good, and we'll let Casey get back to building a house before he heads out to the last couple events of the season. Casey, appreciate you, man. Best of luck to you. I've always enjoyed our conversations together, even if they were brief. And hopefully myself and Mr. Greg Hackney will co-host Bass Live, and we'll see you Sunday on the final day of the Ozarks event.
Well, I'm looking forward to it and planning on Sunday. So we'll see you later, Ronnie. Appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Casey Scanlon, our guest today on the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. He's definitely going to be one of the Ozark guys we keep an eye on for the 8th stop out of 9 for the Bassmaster Open season. Kyle, Casey Scanlon, a good rundown. Plenty of big checks and trophies behind him in that shot to say, hey, we need to listen into what he says about Lake of the Ozarks. We've got actually a decent reputation. We've had some guys finish in the hundreds, but we had Sam George get 4th, Jack Dice get 4th, and John Garrett get 5th in 3 of our prediction shows and preview shows. So maybe Casey Scanlon can wrap out and get, at least we can have half of our predictors this year be, top 10 finishes. So Casey, obviously one to watch this week in the Ozarks.
Yeah, you could kind of tell, he wasn't, by no means was he like cocky or like kind of like overstepping anything, but you could just sense a quiet confidence, like a confidence that he's been looking forward to this, and he feels like he's got a good idea, obviously, of what the deal will be before the tournament even starts. Obviously we'll have time to figure it out and dial it in practice, but like you said, certainly one to look for this week at Lake of the Ozarks.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the local guys always want chaos to happen. They want
Yeah.
it to get super cold. They want it to rain super bunch, like whatever, because it only when the conditions get tougher, it puts it in their category. So he was wanting that spontaneous change, if he could request that. But cooler mornings, still decently not warm nights, but like the last few nights have been like, I could sweat if I hung out here a little longer, but then in the mornings it's pretty brisk. So we'll see how those conditions change. Kyle, are you going to the Ozarks to cover this event, or are you hanging back and maybe you'll cover the Harris Chain?
I am not. So Chase Sansom will be headed there. We've got good crew going. Sego shooting an open. That's gonna be yeah. He shoots some there towards the end of the season. So we're gonna have our, as I say, our best men on the job there at Lake of the Ozarks. Tyler Bridges, a younger photographer from the same area that Dalton Tumblin and Logan Crumley are from. He's going to be headed there. I'm working on the
recruiting
website.
base.
So,
that's our recruiting hotbed.
yeah, no kidding. That's pretty much like that is pretty much our recruiting base. That's where we get all of our 5-star recruits. But no, I'll be working on the website. I'm actually excited because I will get to watch live, unlike this past week. So I certainly plan on Sunday plopping down, watching some football, watching some Bass live, and making a day of it, and producing for the website.
Well, if you are trying to tune in, the tournament starts Friday instead of Thursday. So it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll have full field Friday and Saturday, top 10 on Sunday. You only got 4 guaranteed days left in the season to fish, and that's day 1 and day 2 of these last 2 opens. So these anglers are high urgency on getting as many points as possible. The top 10 that fish on Sunday, we will have them on Fox Sports 1, which is a great window of time. We always talk about Fox Sports 1 and our partnership with them. On Saturdays, we leading into college football. On Sundays, we lead into NASCAR and obviously NFL coverage that they have on their shows throughout Fox. So I know that it's going to be a great viewer base to watch the top 10. We'll bring in some big guns. We had Mark Menendez join us in studio last week for commentary with Watts Bar. He did a fantastic job. And Greg Hackney will drive up from Louisiana to join us for the final day coverage of Lake of the Ozarks. I asked Jason Christie, but I knew the answer was already no before I asked because he's getting married very soon. So I let Jason be, but I wanted him to know I was thinking about him. And if he was got a wild hair, you could join us in studio too as well. I could only imagine having a Greg Hackney and Jason Christie on a commentary crew together. That would be absolutely, I'm not even going to, for the first time in my life, the fans would be rewarded. I'd probably shut up and just let them chat back and forth all day. But it'd be a great show. Such will join us, myself and Greg Hackney, and we will cover Lake of the Ozarks live on FS1 and Bassmaster.com, and we hope to see you there. That's our preview episode for Lake of the Ozarks. The points race after Watts Bar got even tighter in some aspects, had some flip-flops. Guys who were in are now out. Urgency is now at their doorstep. I better go catch them, and the guys who are in, don't fish tight because you want to protect your lead and your gap, but you do not want to lose your lead. So we will see how it all transpires. Keep an eye on the updates as they come in every single day. For Ronnie Moore, that's Kyle, Jessie. We will see you in the next podcast where we preview and look at the College Classic bracket, because that's another tournament on Bassmaster Live coming up very soon. We will crown the single representative of the College Series. They will go to the Bassmaster Classic, and they will get an opportunity to represent all of college next year on the Bassmaster Opens in the EQ points race. So for Ronnie Moore, that's Kyle, Jessie. We will see you in the next one.